Welcome to the Faces of Leadership podcast, presented by Command Presence Training and hosted by CEO Michael Warren. At Command Presence, we believe leadership comes down to two things: people and action. In each episode, we sit down with leaders from across professions and communities who are stepping up, making a difference, and leading where they are with what they have. Together, we'll explore the lessons they've learned, the challenges they've faced, and the decisions that shaped their leadership journey. Because the ultimate question isn't just what we can learn from them, it's what we can learn from each other. As we strive to become the leader we wish we had. Today, Michael is joined by Rusty Byers for episode 27, Connecting Technology to Mission.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming back again to Faces of Leadership podcast. Folks, I hope you've had time to go and check out our last episode with the guys from Caden AI. Listen, I every single time I talk to people like that, I am blown away by what is possible and what is available out there. So we had a technology theme with our last episode, and this episode we're going to continue with that theme, but we're going to go to a much broader sense technology-wise. So let me give you a quick intro of our guest, and this is going to be very informal, very brief, because he's going to talk a little bit about himself, because it leads into what he's doing now. But my guest today is Rusty Byers. Rusty is not only a guest, but I like to call him a friend. He may not appreciate that, but I like to call him a friend. But Rusty is a Marine Corps vet. We're going to get into that. But he has spent over 30 years in the public safety sector. And if you can imagine what has changed technology-wise in the last 30 years, what were dreams back when he first started now are not only reality, but they're expected. And the work that he's doing right now helps to take these expectations that we have both internal in our organizations and external to our organizations. He takes those expectations and helps to turn them into a reality. So everybody, please welcome Rusty Byers. Rusty, welcome aboard,
Mike.
brother.
I appreciate it, buddy. I'm glad to be here.
Man, I tell you what, whenever you start doing somebody's bio, it's always interesting what they include in it, because I ask it of people, right? Because I don't want to write their bio, and it's interesting to me because a couple episodes we had a Marine Corps vet on here, and Jeff Manzer. Go back and check out that episode. But it's funny in a good sense how Marine Corps vets, how much emphasis they place on their time in the Corps. And in our time together that we spent personally together, there's been that, and I give you a hard time about it, but a good-natured hard time. But why was the Marine Corps, why was that so influential on Rusty the person, Rusty the man, Rusty the leader, if you will?
It's I think the core of it goes back to doing hard things. When I first contacted a recruiter about joining the Marine Corps, I was actually working summers in my dad's office. He worked for a company called Davy Tree Company, and I was basically cleaning out trucks just my senior year of high school, and had gotten accepted to a few universities, but just really didn't think that was where I needed to transition into. At lunchtime, I took a break and I called the Army recruiter at 12:05. Nobody answered the phone. I called the Navy recruiter at 12:10. No one answered the phone. I didn't think about calling the Air Force, but I called the Marine Corps recruiter at 12:12, and before the first ring even completed, a gunnery sergeant answered the phone. Literally 5 hours later, I was sitting in his office having a conversation with him about the Marine Corps and was I good enough to be in his Corps.
Wow, that's a powerful recruiting message right there. Not what can we do to get you in the Corps, but before we can even consider it, are you good enough to be?
And I don't think I was at that point in time. It took a lot of effort to get good enough. But the Marine Corps for me they taught me some fundamental lessons of leadership. And you can always lead. Some of the classes that you guys teach is a leading without rank. I think that's invaluable. But you lead people, you manage things. And in our day and our age nowadays, everybody just wants to manage everything. They want to manage time, they want to manage people, they want to manage assets, they want to manage all that. But the leadership aspect of it gets lost. And that was one of the things in the Marine Corps. When you're a sergeant, you know what a staff sergeant does. When you're a corporal, you know what a sergeant does, and so forth and so forth. So you're constantly being forced to learn and inspired to learn more than what you're responsible for, because you never know what might happen. You might be the guy. So that was the fundamental thing that just grabbed me, and I just ran with it.
Wait, would you agree that the Marine Corps trains very hard for the worst possible scenarios? Because in many cases, that's what they have to deal with are those worst scenarios. And the idea is if I train well enough, that perhaps that prevents those bad things from happening. But if they do happen, then I will be able to handle
Very
them
much so. And
appropriately.
there's another aspect to it too. The Marines are very proud of the fact that we're the only armed force that has balanced budget, right? And our dollars are accountable, and we do more with less. It's almost that albatross you wear around your neck that we're always going to do more with less. We got the crappier equipment, we have all that kind of stuff, but we're going to do more. And that mentality, being able to do more with less, kind of transitioned over when I started doing public safety, because cops were constantly having to do more with less, regardless of the cool, shiny object out there. Not every agency could afford that. So it just was a nice segue into that mentality.
Well, and the Marine Corps are known. They're known for a bunch of different things. People, Marines, right? And most
Yeah.
of them good. Most of them good. But one of the things that they're known for is their
Yes.
dress uniform, and the uniform sends a message. And one of the posts that you had when you were serving was as an embassy guard. You
Yep.
had embassy duty, and I don't think that people realize what a sought after post that is and how competitive it is to get that assignment. So can you tell me a
Yeah.
little
It
bit
was.
about that?
It was something that I had reached a point in my career. I was a corporal and wanted to go to the next level. And in the Marine Corps, you have to serve so many years in the line company type organization before you can do a special duty, whether that's drill instructor or whatever, embassy duty. So I applied for it, and I ended up having to go through 5 or 6 different panels. When you're a corporal sitting in front of a panel of majors and colonels, and they're asking you hard questions about everything from etiquette to how you're going to react in this situation, it really tests your mettle. Number one, can you keep your calm? Can you keep your nerve? And number two, can you think through the process? Because that's really what they're vetting. They're vetting your ability to think through the process. So it was a challenge. My class at Quantico, we started off with 152 Marines. We graduated 87 is what we graduated.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so ironic because we started off talking about this gunnery sergeant trying to figure out, hey man, are you good enough to be
Yeah.
in my corps? And then you prove that, as did those other 152 Marines, right? And yet they still weren't able to do this. And I don't want to overstate this, but I don't want to understate it as well. Listen, if you do something wrong when you're on embassy duty, uh, that could be the start of an
Yeah.
international incident. And you served in some, if you don't mind sharing where you served with embassy duty, because I think that really highlights it could be an
Well, most
international
posts
incident.
are typically have a staff NCO and then the rank and file underneath them. I was in Vienna, Austria, and then I was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And Vienna was 22 Marines, and Riyadh was, I think at our height, we were never fully staffed, but at our height, I think we were 23 as well. So they were some of the larger posts. There's some posts out there, like some of the posts in Africa and even some in Central America that are 7, 8 Marines. I mean, that's all it is. And you're it. You're the representation, and you are the last line of defense for the embassy. The host country will secure the outside of the facility, but you own the inside. You own the classified material. You own making sure everyone's safe. You own everything. And then in addition to that, you're not just doing the embassy, but you're doing the facilities that issue passports and all the documentation to get in and visit the United States and all that kind of stuff. So you're dealing with all kinds of people. And the United States, contrary to popular belief, does not let everybody in. And when someone's told they're not coming in, sometimes it's a dramatic experience. I mean, there's been more than one occasions we had to physically remove people from the embassy or one of our substructures, right? So it's a challenge. You never know what you're going to get on a daily basis.
Well, and for those who maybe don't understand this, when there's an embassy in a foreign country, that's
Sovereign.
American soil. You're guarding
Hmm.
America. It just happens to be talking
Yeah,
about remote work, brother. That's
it very
remote
much.
work.
And you have in the facilities, you may have the intelligence services on one floor or in one portion of the building. You have cultural attaches, which may do everything from farming, just trying to get business in other countries. You have the political infrastructure, and then you just have this small cadre of Marines that works with the full-time government service people, right? The bureaucrats. And it's interesting. There's a dynamic to it of interpersonal relationships. You try to learn the language, right? You want to be able to coordinate. If you have multiple facilities, you're having to move in between those facilities. So in Vienna, we had 4 facilities. So we were constantly moving in between, and that was during the height of the Cold War. And Austria at that point in time had more spies per capita than any other country in Europe because it was all the communist countries around it. So the probability of you running across bad actors, not necessarily in a threatening way, but being in their proximity was pretty good.
Well, you talked. One of the things that the Marine Corps taught you was that you manage things, you lead people, and I would imagine that the embassy setting you really saw that because you mentioned bureaucrats, and we need them. I mean, let's be honest with each other, but they were more about things and processes. But when things were going bad, they looked for leadership from the
Yeah.
Marines, and it didn't matter if we're talking about an E3, a PFC, a lance corporal, a sergeant. That's who you look to because those are the ones that you knew could show you the
Well, it's
way.
it's very similar in nature to law enforcement in the sense that when something bad happens, everything turns. And the people who were just kind of innocuous in the background that you didn't really pay that much attention to, you just knew they were there, all of a sudden they become in charge and we became in charge. So the bureaucrats that, just did their whole deal, day and night and ran the embassy and ran the relations and all that kind of stuff, they immediately went into lockdown mode. And it was our job to secure them, secure classified material, the weapons, everything, right? Everything had to be taken care of. And we became the pinnacle of interaction at that point. And it wasn't until our staff NCO, whether it was a gunny or a staff sergeant, said all clear. And he or she or he would not say yet all clear until his troops, the Marines, you know, dealing with the pieces and parts of the embassy. And some of the embassies have multiple facilities inside a single compound. That's how Riyadh was. So you relied on a lance corporal or a corporal saying things are good to go, and the staff sergeant would then turn to the civilians and say, okay, now you can go back to doing. We used to get bomb threats weekly. And back in those days, before all the technology we have now, it was a post-it note. You literally went room to room looking for the bomb. And when the room was clear, you put a post-it note on the door and it was good, right? So technology has probably increased a great since then.
And for our listeners, I just want to point out that he said back in those days. Yes, Rusty is from the 1900s. Okay, as is Mikey. But to us, it doesn't seem that
No,
long ago. But we'll go
yeah,
with back in those days. But you talked about the bad things happen because you're also a veteran of the
yep.
invasion of Panama and also the first Gulf War. And so, what did those experiences teach you that maybe prepared you a little bit for what you're doing now and what you've done in the public safety sector up until
So
now?
the invasion of Panama Operation Just Cause was there was a lot of lead up to it. The Marines were put on an offensive posture. We were nationally we were kind of on a defensive posture. The Panamanians would ride up to the gate of the army base and snatch a PFC off and hold him for several hours, beat him up. And the Marines weren't having any of that. The Army at that point in time weren't allowed to carry loaded weapons. Our leadership was like, no way. Every Marine's locked and loaded at all times. So we were in much more of a defensive posture. So that was one of those things we're dealing with the populace and the indigenous populace because we would fly down the road in AAVs with the 25 millimeter chain gun on the top, do a roadblock, and literally search every car for an hour, right? collect everything from BB guns to AK-47s. I shouldn't say collect; it was confiscate. Is what we did. Um,
Collect's a
yeah,
good term. I like
that's the
that one.
politically correct term. So from an offensive perspective, it was when you're a young Marine, it was like the pinnacle. This is what we're here for. Let's go, right? Operating with the fleet forces, the fleet anti-terrorist forces and stuff like that was super cool. Securing the hospital, doing all that. And it taught me, it was all about teamwork. There is no individuals in that environment. You know, we see war movies and you see the Audie Murphys and, you know, whatever hero that you have out there, the Rambos of the world. And that's not how it works. It's you and the guy next to you moving, because if he's not there, there's a good chance you're not going to make it, right? So you're moving. So it's all about teamwork. After that, the first Gulf War was, I was coming out of Riyadh, thought I was coming back to North Carolina. We decided to go to war. So I went back to Riyadh. That was a different adventure too, because there was a lot of hurry up and wait with that. There was a lot of scuds coming over, a lot of things like that, potential chemical attacks, which is terrifying because you train for chemical warfare, but the thought of actually ingesting nerve agent or some type of toxicant was just, it's terrifying, right? So you have to deal with that, and you have to deal with the fact that it could literally happen at any moment. So that from, I don't really think I had any big leadership epiphanies during that time frame. It was just that time in America, you were part of something bigger. And there was a feeling that came with being part of something bigger, that no matter how small your participation role was, whether it was going into Kuwait City, working with the engineers, helping clear mines, whatever you were doing, you were part of something bigger, which was awesome.
All right, Rusty. I'm going to see if you can track on what I'm thinking about here. Panama, it really kind of illustrated the way that we need to work together, internal to an organization or internal to our armed forces. So you talked about the what was going on with the Army, but when you went to Desert Storm or Desert Shield, Desert Storm, uh, that cooperation, that interaction had to take place on a
Hmm.
global level because it wasn't just America there. I mean, we had a number of allies, including Russia, who just a few years before that were the people that we were training
Every
to
day.
fight, right? And so Rusty, to wrap that part up right here, if the pieces aren't working well together, if they're not talking to each other, can that have a negative impact on mission accomplishment?
100%. I'll give you an example. First Gulf War, we actually had units get lost in the dark. For anyone who's never been in the desert, at night it's cold, very cold, and there's no terrain features. So it's super easy to get lost. So literally from an op order, when two units are supposed to bivouac near each other or set in an emplacement near each other, if they're not coordinated and they're supposed to be maybe a quarter mile or something, or an eighth of a mile in between units, if they're not coordinating and people aren't realizing at a macro and a minor level, you could end up cattywampus, or you could end up a mile and a half apart. And that could be catastrophic because an enemy could drive right through there and you would never know.
Well, and then once the hostilities start, I mean, potentially you could end up
Very much
behind
so.
the lines and create some issues there. So I just have to I want to emphasize one thing real quick before we move on. People laugh about it because in retrospect, it's always easy to look at things when you know what is going to happen, right? But the threat of a chemical attack was very, very real. And it was I don't know what it was like in boot camp for you, but when we went to the NBC, the nuclear biological chemical range, man, I mean, people paid attention because that was a real threat at that time. And I can remember, the nerve
Hmm.
agent antidote that you had to administer,
Yeah.
the spring loader stuff right there. I can still remember them jacking with us, man. And so not everybody's going to get this, but I think you will. I can remember our company commander getting up in front of us and saying, "Listen, every company commander has the choice on how that saltpeter is going to be administered to the troops coming in. I have made the decision that we're going to do it. It's going to be a dual role. We're going to learn how to use the nerve agent antidote, and we're going to administer that at the same time, man." And I can remember the first dude going up there, going and administering that thing right there, just waiting for that needle to inject. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's good
yeah.
times, good times.
It was a different world.
So yes, it was. So the thing is now, you get out of the Marine Corps and you somehow get involved in the public safety
Yeah.
sector. Is there anything in particular that drew you to that sector as opposed to some other place that perhaps you could have
Yeah,
worked?
I was very fortunate. I ended up marrying a young lady that was teaching in Jacksonville, North Carolina, where I was in the Marine Corps when I got out. Um, and we ended up moving to Wilmington, North Carolina, which if you've never been there, it's just gorgeous, beautiful place. I was going to school. I was a assistant manager at a health club. A guy I worked out with. Uh, One day he told me, he said, "Hey, you should interview with my company. We're hiring salespeople." I'm like, "I'm not a sales guy." And I'm like, "By the way, what do y'all do?" And he goes, "We sell software to cops." And I was like, "Dude, you're crazy. I don't want anything to do with cops. I mean, I'd spent half my life running away from cops, and you want me to go talk to them?" And for some odd reason, call it heavenly inspiration, I decided to go have the interview. And I did. And through the course of the interview, I fell in love with it. And I was in love with it, but not like knee deep in love with it. But then after I started doing it for a while, I
Right.
made my first couple of sales calls in South Carolina, where I was primarily working. And I was dealing with the sergeants and the lieutenants and the colonels and the chiefs and stuff like that. It just all felt comfortable. And I was like, okay, this is a world I can live in. I didn't think I would do it for 32 years. I can honestly tell you that. But it just started going.
Well, it's ironic to me because there's a big push now. People talk about humanizing the badge and stuff like that. But when you sit down with somebody in the profession, you really are you're dealing with the salt of
Hmm.
the earth folks.
Very much so.
And so so you've dealt with CAD, computer aided dispatch. You've done records management systems, RMS. You did stuff in rapid DNA. What has been, I guess not. I hate using the word trends, but what are some of the recurring themes that you've seen in our profession, the public safety sector, as it relates to
Yeah,
technology?
like that's a great question, and it's really interesting because the worm is turned, right? So we both deal with a very risk adverse environment, right? It's a profession naturally risk adverse, and it's a profession that likes to be in control, which is totally understandable for the mission. When I started in public safety, we didn't have that great, wonderful thing called the internet, right? So it was computers. We were transitioning from mainframes to desktops and stuff like that, freaking people out. I can remember dispatchers throwing a mouse at me saying, "I'll never use that," that type stuff. Um, but I've seen that trend of the trend of going towards the technology that aligns with the younger people coming into the profession. um, I saw the trend moving where we want to put more things in the officer's hands so they can do it in the field because that's how they're growing up. They're growing up used to dealing with that stuff, right? And having it right there in front of them. Not everything's on the other end of a radio or whatever. So I saw those trends. It was just interesting to watch. There would be a shiny object hit the market. Like right now we're dealing with drones and AI and all that kind of stuff, right? But back in those days, it was mobile data. I'm actually going to do an incident report in the field and all this kind of stuff, and I'm going to hit a button and it's going to validate it and send it back. That was ground shaking in that world, right? I mean, there was chiefs who were freaked out that the officers would be crashing their cars because they would be trying to do that, or the Panasonic would break loose and kill somebody in the car in a crash. There was all those things, right? Because it's a risk adverse situation that we just had to work our way through. And most of it we were just figuring out as we went because there was no playbook. It was a brand new playbook.
What? Okay, so Rusty, all of us, I think, have this tendency to look back in fondness on the way things were, and so when we talk about military careers, man, listen, GPS, man, we have no stupid
Oh,
GPS.
yeah.
We had a
That's
compass, we
right.
had a map, right? Yeah, And so you shot an azimuth. You figured out how far you're going to go. You had a pace man, and then you went there. That's how you operated. Terrain features, all that
Yeah.
type stuff, right? And then I didn't need no GPS to tell me where I'm at. Listen, but I'll look at the stars and I'll figure that stuff out. But do we still need those skills of being able to do map reading and using a compass, because technology can go down, and in fact it has gone down before. But I, have you noticed that there's sometimes that leaders become overly attached, overly personally in love with a certain piece of technology or a certain way of do things, and it's perhaps detrimental to the progress of the organization and even the safety of
I
their
think
people.
the way I would put a tagline on the end of that is they're in love with the output. They're in love with the output and they're in
I
love with
like
the
it.
perception of the output, right? If I can go stand in front of a city council meeting and say, hey, we spent that $4 million, but look what we were able to do, right? We were able to reduce this crime. We were able to do whatever. They fall in love with that. But sometimes they forget about, or it just gets lost in the mix, right? Because we're all running as fast as we can to adopt new technology. Um, they forget about what it takes to accomplish that. If you're a 300-man police department and you're trying to deploy mobile data, field reporting, you're using GPS for the first time, and the guys that are coming into that world are used to carrying Thomas guides and they're used to, writing things down and they had a pencil in their thing. It's a transition. And sometimes it's an age sensitive transition. So I think there's a lot of soft factors that go into that we as vendors, we're very guilty of this. We're just like, oh, it's new great technology, got to use it. And the agency's like, yes, it's new great technology, we got to use it. And the users are like, oh crap, look what I got to do, because they either got to learn it or leave, right? I mean, that may not be the
Right.
case, but that's what they're thinking in the back of their mind. And I think when we started to humanize some of our training and our sales pitch and our implementation strategies, and how we deployed solutions to take those things into consideration, it changed the success outcome. It gave the leadership their ultimate desired output, but it changed that middle part. It wasn't so painful. It wasn't wailing and gnashing your teeth with everything.
Well, we've said it before on this podcast, that people are reluctant
Hmm.
to change, and it's not because they're bad. It's not because they're lazy. It's because change
Hmm.
feels dangerous. Because comfort comes from a lack of perception of danger,
Very much.
right? And so if I've been using if I've been using my pen and my pencil to complete my reports, I know how to do that. And I haven't gotten fired. I'm not incarcerated, so things are going pretty good right now. And now when you start trying to bring in field reporting and mobile data and that type of thing, it's not necessarily the technology. It's the fact that I don't know how this could possibly negatively impact me. And I think that leaders, like you just talked about it, that if they did a better job, and I hate using the phrase, but if they did a better sales job
So it
up
is.
front, of then you get less
I agree.
resistance.
I agree 100%. There's some other aspects to it too. You have to understand that not everything needs to change overnight. It can be a stair step process. It's okay if not every shift is using the latest and greatest stuff right away. Let's transition that over time. But our tendency is to just flip the switch. Tomorrow we're flipping the switch and this is how it's going to be. And we wrote a new SOP and, by God, this is how it's going to be. And yeah, and
For
I
everybody.
just looking back over my career, dealing with the officers I've dealt with, I've been very fortunate. I've been to 3 weddings, unfortunately, a couple of funerals, multiple retirements. And I look back over those relationships, and those guys and girls were living their lives, their own personal lives. They were doing their jobs. They were trying to get promoted. They were trying not to stay, or trying to stay out of trouble politically in the communities, right? Do the right thing. And then here I am throwing new technology out. So talk about wearing multiple hats. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yes. Well, and you talked about the shiny object, and I'm guilty of that. I mean, you can probably tell in the background. I
Yeah.
like lights. Lights. I think lights are cool. I just the shiny thing, but the human eye is drawn to light and is drawn to movement, and 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 I understand why they do it, uh, because we want them. We want, if you're a salesperson, you want to draw attention to your product because that's the only way you can sell the product. But the problem often is that this shiny object over here doesn't talk to this shiny object over here, and they both have utility. But if I can't make them work together, it can create issues for
I
my people.
I think that's a great point, and I'll add another point on top of that, and that is, how does the new technology impact my career path? When I was selling rapid DNA, we had an instrument about the size of a 1980s microwave that could do a DNA sample in 94 minutes. Do a buccal swab. You did not have to be a lab technician to run it. An officer with some basic training can run it. An officer who learned how to collect evidence at a crime scene was fully qualified to run it. It was ground changing. And I had a really hard lesson taught to me by some people in state labs, because they were like, what you're giving the officers is just game changing, and you're making their world dynamic and all this, but you don't understand why we operate the way we operate at the state lab. And when they broke that down and explained it to me, like, hey, look, if you're at the state lab, it's the example they gave me is an officer walks up to you and gives you the car keys and says, my car's broke. And at the state lab, you go, what's wrong? And he goes, I don't know, it's broke. So you start at one bumper and you start testing every system all the way through to the end of the other bumper till you figure out what's wrong. So it's just a different perspective. So I think one of the challenges with our industry is to make sure you understand the perspective of the different roles you're dealing with. A dispatcher looks at things totally different than a patrol officer versus a records clerk or an evidence tech. So you have to understand their perspective, because what's important to them? Is important speed? Not always. Is important accuracy? Most times. So you just got to ask those questions.
But we used to say that you have three options: good,
Yeah.
fast, and cheap. But you only get to
Yeah.
choose two of those, and you have to make the decision of those, which one are more important, and the answer you're going to get is going to be different for the road than it was in the
Very much.
detective section, than it is perhaps in a lab or in corrections or in dispatch, and so you can only really answer those questions if you understand your people and the roles that they
Yeah.
fill.
So there's a lot of preparatory work for going into a new system. Um, really doing discovery conversations with your people. Like, how do they work? What does your job look like? Sometimes executives, just being very honest, I've seen it in real life, executives kind of lose track of what their people are doing. They know what is supposed to be achieved, but they don't necessarily understand what they're doing. They don't understand the fact that they got to do this, to do this, to do this, to do this, to finally get the result the chief sees. So the chief just wants to change everything. And nothing negative against the chief, but I mean, it's just doing that discovery. I think is way underrated. And quite honestly, as a vendor, if you're a good vendor and a good salesperson, you'll help them do that discovery. And that's part of what we do with JPS Trust is that discovery.
Well, I would propose that the best salespeople do more
Oh yeah,
listening than they do
100%.
talking, and that's the only way that you can truly understand what the pain points are, where the needs are, so that you can
I
perhaps
agree.
meet them.
I mean, my mom used to say you have two ears and one mouth, so that's true. My dad just told me to shut up, but that's just how it works.
There's that, right? Go clean that truck. So you made the transition. So you've worked in all these different things, and it's kind of funny to me in an ironic sense that that throughout your career you were working for these little bitty pieces, not little in terms, but there
Hmm.
were pieces of the overall picture. And then you got involved with this group called Strategic Communications JPS Trust, and that was, if I were going to equate it, it's like, you were a sous chef before. You were preparing the ingredients, And this right here is really what has allowed you to be a chef, to properly mix these things together to create these really, really good dishes. So why don't you do it, if you would, just take a couple minutes and just kind of explain what strategic is all about, what JPS Trust is all about, and then we'll talk about how it serves the leaders in our
Definitely.
profession.
Thank you. So first of all, kudos, huge kudos goes out to Kathy Mills and Chris Mills. Chris is my boss, the chief revenue officer, and Kathy Mills, the CEO and founder of Strategic. And Strategic been around 30 years, a value-added reseller. So for folks who don't know what a VAR, a value-added reseller is, we basically have contracts and we have capabilities where we resell other people's products and allow them to use our contracts. And the state and local market is transitioning to reflect a lot of the federal mentality of you have to have standardized contracts and all that kind of stuff. So that's where the world's going. But Kathy, truly groundbreaking, brilliant woman, created a company, worked her tail off, grew the company. We're roughly 100 people right now. We do 175 million a year, which is just awesome. Totally punch above our weight. We can go toe to toe with any of the big guys, right? But when they hired me, we were talking about capability for public safety, and we had just a scattered few products that we were reselling. And Strategic really was cloud experts and networking experts and contracting experts. That was their expertise. So I was coming in not really as a sales resource, but as a subject matter expert. And which means I'm an old guy, right? I've been here a long time. And so when I came in, I said, well, tell me your pitch. What do you guys say when you're talking to customers? Oh, we're small minority woman-owned business. We got all these contracts. We have all this cloud expertise. We can do all this kind of stuff. And I was like, y'all, that's awesome. I'm Southern, so I throw y'all in there. That's awesome and it's amazing. But if I'm a chief, a sheriff, a warden, I don't care. You haven't talked to me as a practitioner. You talk to IT and you talk to purchasing. So they challenged me to come up with a concept for how we could go to market. And we ended up with this program called JPS Trust. And essentially it's a buying program. So we break JPS Trust activity into a couple different levels. We want to talk to leadership. We want to talk to operations, IT, which is one of our core principles, and we want to talk to purchasing, which a lot of times is just checking the box, right? You have the contract, you're good to go. Because we've all, either on your side of the house as a practitioner or on my side as a vendor, have worked on a project for a year and then purchasing shut you down because you didn't have the right contract, right? So those two bottom ones, you definitely got to get check marks. The IT department, when I first started, most agencies own their own IT. It was they had some officers or maybe somebody who was technically savvy who ran the IT. Maybe it's a person who had a home computer back in those days, right? Your IT, right? You're on patrol and your IT. Nowadays, probably about 95% or higher of the agencies are customers of a centralized IT. So centralized IT, by its very nature, they have their own 3-year plan, 5-year plan, their own proclivities for the type of systems they want to deploy and support and all that. And they want to support their customers. So a lot of times, agencies, whether it's police, fire, EMS, doesn't matter, they end up like this with IT because they want one thing, IT's like, that's not part of our plan. So we can help mitigate that. The operations and the leadership, this goes right back to our understanding and doing the discovery earlier. What I saw in my career was there was sometimes a disconnect between what the operational folks wanted and what leadership wanted. So being able to talk to them individually and find out their needs, their wants, just get the whole skinny on what's going on with both groups, and then go back and say, this is how we're going to bridge the gap with IT. Oh, and by the way, we checked the box with purchasing. So once we get through all the mating love affair type activity, we can actually make this contract happen. I put that together into a program with Chris and Kathy's support, and that's what we go to an agency with. So when we go to an agency, let's just pick on Novi Police Department. When we go to Novi, we want to meet with the chief, find out, okay, sir, what's your, or, whatever, is your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, where do you need to be, what's your budgets look like? Then we meet with operations, find out where the gaps are, figure out where the deltas are, try to fill it all out. And then the other two groups, and then we come back with actually a plan. And I call it a portfolio, where we're basically just laying out a portfolio saying, we know that you can't afford to buy everything that we have right now, but what's the prioritization of things that really solve the business problems now that we can help you with? And then we just start working through it. The other thing that I was pretty adamant about was we can't charge the agency. We're not consultants. We're consultative, but we're not consultants. So it's no cost to the agency. So where we get paid is from our partners. And we want to earn the right to sit on the agency side of the table to help vet the partners, right? If the agency at any given time says, hey, I don't think this is worthwhile, we just go away. It's just that simple. If we do earn their respect and their business and we get some business, then we only ask them for permission to come back and talk to them in 6 months, talk to them in 8 months, talk to them in a year, and go revisit more issues. That's the relationship we want.
Well, Rusty, as you were talking there, one of the things that came to my mind is that if you have an individual investor uh, who uh, who seeks to fund their retirement by buying individual stocks, by choosing those ones right there, most of those people, the overwhelming majority of those people, aren't
Mm,
financially successful. Most people are best suited by going and buying a mutual fund,
group together.
and then they've got this where they go out and they say you need some of this sector, you need some of this sector over here, and that sounds very close to what you guys offer. It's not the individual products, although the individual products, the platforms are fantastic. It's that plus how they
Yeah.
integrate with each other, how they talk
It's
to each
the
other.
it's the holistic impact, right? So in a previous parts of my career, I sold CAD records and mobile, which I call the big box vendors, right? They're the big solutions. But there's always solutions that
Right.
fit in the cracks that get left out, right? Um, so as an example,
Mhm.
we have a thing called the personnel journey, and this is how we got to you guys at Command Presence. Is the personnel journey? When I looked at it, I said, okay, there's multiple aspects to the personnel journey, and a lot of times in an agency, they're totally stovepipe. This is what Mary does. This is what John does. This is what whatever. But you have, if a chief says, "Hey, Rusty, I want to look at a scheduling solution," then I think it's my responsibility to say, "Chief, can I bring you a recruiting solution? Because you guys are still going to job fairs and you're still doing stuff like that. Can I bring you a recruiting solution that's fully modern? How about a background solution? Because right now it's taking you guys almost a year and a half to get somebody on board. What if I brought you a solution that could automate that process and cut it down to 5 or 6 months?
Yes.
Oh, and by the way, I have a scheduling solution, Rockstar scheduling solution. Here's something. How about an officer wellness solution? A tool that helps you look after the wellness of your officers, both emotionally, physically, everything else. It's a big initiative nationally. It's being really pushed. The risk mitigation
Hmm.
people at the cities and counties, it's top of their list. The accreditation people are dealing with it. Can I bring that? Oh, and by the way, I also have some partners to do business automation. And a lot of times they look at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm looking around your office and I still see manual, 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 binder, binder. If we could automate all that and the officer didn't have to have an SOP binder in the vehicle, it could all be automated on their MDT. I have a partner that can do that, an AI based automation tool that could be real time. So now when I bring you that solution, it's a holistic solution to that whole continuum of personnel, is how I approach it. And we do that for
Well, it's
modernizing corrections, drones and counter drones, probation, parole, and courts. We do it for intelligence investigations and big data AI management.
it's the full gamut, if you will, of the criminal justice profession. That there are a lot of people that focus just on the dispatch side of things, or on the patrol side or the record side. When the reality is, it's all
Yeah.
one system. It just doesn't talk very well together. But from a leadership perspective, it's done in support of leadership and leadership mission. And you've already talked about Kathy, and I just want to come back to her for a second, because for a female to accomplish what she has accomplished in what is predominantly a male dominated technology sector, it's really kind
Mhm.
of amazing. And she's fun to talk to. In fact, I was on a call with her earlier this week, and I love how she's very no nonsense, but she's also
Yeah.
self-deprecating, which is a very big thing. But how is it to work for somebody like Kathy, who's very driven, who's very do hard things. Let's go and let's get it done, right? And then you also have Chris, who's an incredibly intelligent guy, but perhaps is a little bit more
Yeah.
laid back. But you've got these two individuals that have accomplished so much already, but they bring you in and they say, Rusty, let's do it. And they've kind of given you they've not only given you the opportunity, but they've given you the support and resources in order to accomplish what you set out to accomplish.
Well,
What's
I'm
that
not going
like?
to say that every decision I made that they didn't kind of look like, okay, here we go. There was a few of those in there, but to their credit, they said they were going to trust me. They trusted me and they let me do it. That didn't mean that I didn't have guardrails, because any good CEO is going to set
Hmm.
up guardrails. Because even as smart as I think I am, I can get off course every once in a while. Um, Kathy is incredibly insightful and tenacious. Um, I would say the insightful, tenacious, and perceptive. When you're having a conversation with her, she's already thinking ahead because she understands where you're going. She'll let you get your words out. And I'm Southern, so I have a lot of words. So she'll let me get those out. Um, but that's a rare combination. It's a rare combination. So that's cool. Chris has been fantastic because, him being younger, he's very in tune to technology, he's very in tune to the trends and all this kind of stuff. And, here comes this old guy in there going, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And I jokingly say that he's probably rolling his eyes and smiling through about 50% of our conversations because he's like, here we go. Rusty's got another,
Yep,
Rusty,
grinning and
yeah,
nodding,
I got
grinning and
another,
nodding.
Rusty's got another plan he wants to do. But at the same time, um, I haven't heard a no. I've heard not right now. And I've heard let's figure that out a little bit more. And I think that's powerful because when you're an employee, you want to know you're making an impact on an organization.
Tell me more. Yeah, tell me more. It is such a powerful thing because it causes people to
Hmm.
slow down and have to articulate their thought process. And a lot of times, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've experienced it when somebody's had me do that, and I'll start talking about this idea, and then all of a sudden, about halfway through, I'm like, oh, it's like, oh, they picked up on that. Daggone it. But that's an incredible learning. That's what leaders are
Yeah.
supposed to do. And so, Rusty, I always tell people in classes that I think that leadership is most closely associated
Yes.
with parenting. And I would be willing to bet that your parents didn't say yes
No.
to everything. And I would be also willing to bet that there were times where you came to them with ideas where they kind of rolled their eyes. And that's okay. That's the role. That's the role of that senior person. But being allowed to try things
You,
is also
you,
incredibly
I,
beneficial.
I would throw something else out there, Mike. There's generationally being able to teach and mentor people. I'm not saying I'm a mentor, but strategic's like any other technology company. We have an army of 20s and 30-year-olds, right? I mean, that's the vast majority of our folks. We have a lot of seasoned folks too, but we have those people in there, and it's very rewarding um, to see the light bulb go on in their head. When you're having a conversation and they're like, oh, I see why we need to write the marketing document that way. I see how this customer looks at XYZ. And and I'm not saying the words dripping out of my mouth are gold, but when you start to see that, moving through the organization and they're maturing, because listening is a maturing skill, right? And when you start to see that, and now they're starting to parrot that, and they're starting to build on that and add their technology to it, and that uh, Gen X or Gen Y perspective on top of it, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's super cool.
It really it is watching the birth, if you will, of
Yeah,
something new is incredibly satisfying. So you guys have partnered with us, and we've run three of
yeah,
them so far. We call them the public safety summits, and we try to we're salespeople, right? We try to come up with some snazzy names, And so we just did the one down in Louisville at your home office there, the Derby Public Safety Summit. But we have another one coming up in South Carolina, the Palmetto State Public Safety Summit. If you were going to talk to somebody who was considering attending one of those events, what would you tell them that experience is like? What are you guys hoping that they take away? What are you hoping that they feel at these events? What's your vision
So
for
first and
those?
foremost, South Carolina is near and dear to my heart. I mean, that was my first territory in public safety. I've been in every square inch of that state. So I'm super excited about that, first of all. But like in Louisville, we had 6 of our JPS Trust partners. And the way we set up the partners is that they were complementary. They told a bigger story. But the takeaway that I would like for the customers to walk away from Charleston with is no pressure. This is, and we're not hovering over them. It's not a hard sales pitch. We're here to help them if they want to be helped. We're here to be a resource if they need a resource. If they just want to buy a point product, we'll sell them a point product. But if they want someone to come alongside them and look at a bigger picture and try to solve bigger problems, then that's what we want to do. And we have a track record of doing it. Over 300 installs in the United States, right? Both federal and state and local. And the partners we're going to have there, again, are going to be complementary. It is super low key. But in reality, if we leave that meeting with those folks liking us as people, because we're not in their face trying to sell them a used car, but they like us as people and they see that we're here to help them truly, I think it's a win at the end of the day. I think it's going to be pretty heavy corrections folks with y'all's relationship with Tennessee and South Carolina on the corrections side. So we're going to have some corrections partners there. And we're also going to have some traditional law enforcement so we can build serve both sides of the house.
And the events we've had so far, from my perspective, because we have 2 days of leadership training, and we have vendors. The vendors are there; they're in the room. They can sit at the table with the attendees, and the whole idea is each of us brings a unique perspective to a potential problem, and we can learn from each other. Networking is
Yeah.
such a cliche word,
True.
but if you do it correctly, it is enhancing. It's a multiplier, if you will. And I just think that the setup just provides an opportunity that you don't get at other types
I
of
I
conferences.
would throw this at you just as a kind of wrap up the industry. When I started in the industry and I started going back in 1994, you go to ICP or APCO or NINA, the big shows, there was probably 75, 100 vendors. A lot of 10 by 10 booths, some big booths. There were big players, Motorola and stuff like that as life went on. But now, if you're the chief of police of Easley, South Carolina, Spartanburg, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and you go to IECP, the big IECP, there's 5,000 vendors there. I mean, how on God's green earth is he or she or their staff or their IT or anybody supposed to wade through all that swirl to find the product that fits them best or the solution that fits them
Yes.
best? It's nigh impossible. It's like watching the news. What do I believe? Do I believe this? Do I believe that? What do I believe? That's what they're dealing with. Because every vendor they're talking to is telling them, we're the best. We do this. We do this. Your life, ROI is good, all that kind of stuff. And what JPS Trust is trying to do and with your meetings is show those folks that we'll help you wade through all that noise and take away the distraction and just boil it down to what you need.
Rusty, I bet you never thought you'd hear this, but I'm going to call you Dr. Rusty for just a second.
I never
There,
thought.
there's a reason why we. Yeah, yeah. You know who else never thought that? Your loved ones. But there's that, right? But Dr. Rusty is my family doctor. He's my general practitioner, and I go to him first with my issues because he's seen things before. I'm not the first
Hmm.
patient that he's seen. He has seen patients try different remedies for problems, and some have been successful, and some haven't been so successful. But he can refer to me to a group of specialists, if you will, that are going to support and work together for my overall health. And that's what when I first found out about JPS Trust, I just thought that, man, this right here is bringing in a subject matter expert to direct me in the right path, but just as importantly, maybe protect me from going down
Yeah.
the wrong path, wasting time and money and resources that I don't have to make me more successful more sooner.
More
There's
sooner.
my southern
I like that.
upbringing right there.
More better, more sooner. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It gets getting gooder and gooder.
I
So
think you're right on the right path, Mike. I think it's just one of those things where it's just there's so much technology being thrown at these folks nowadays, and it's not their core job, right? I remember when I started in the industry, we would have never used the phraseology ROI, return on investment. A chief or sheriff didn't want to hear
yep,
that. That wasn't part of their lexicon. We're here to serve the greater good. That's what we do. Boom, boom, boom. But throughout the years, it's changed. And a lot of the chiefs and sheriffs and stuff like that, they have advanced degrees and they're not in law enforcement. A lot of them are in business and administration
right,
and stuff like that
yep,
because they have to take on that stuff. I remember after Ferguson, I saw police departments laying people off. You had never
mm,
seen that in our history, right? So it's like there's some major
right,
changes that happened that our industry had to accept some business terminology, phraseology, mentality, all that kind of stuff, because they had to respond to the political class, right? And I want to do that in a very educated and supportive way.
I do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, Rusty, and the important work that you're doing to come and talk to us about this. And so for our folks that are watching or listening to this, thank you for joining us today. And as we close the episode out, as we end all our episodes, I encourage you to go out today and be the leader that you wish you had.
Thank you for joining us for the Faces of Leadership podcast, presented by Command Presence Training. A special thank you to the leaders who share their experiences and lessons with our audience. For more episodes, resources, and training opportunities, visit commandpresence.net. And remember, leadership is about people in action. Strive to be the leader you wish you had. We'll see you next time.